ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste my dear friends, this is third video on the Talks with Swami Vivekananda. Talk number 8, and the topics discussed: female education, Mahakali Pathshala, women in India and the West, early marriage, right type of female education, spread of education. Place Calcutta, time 1897, March or April. Today, the disciple came to meet Swamiji at Bagh Bazar but found him ready for a visiting engagement. Well, come along with me, were the words with which Swamiji accosted him as he went downstairs, and the disciple followed. They then put themselves into a hired cab which proceeded southwards. Disciple: Sir, where are you going to visit, please? Swamiji: Well, come with me and you will see. Thus, keeping back the destination from the disciple, Swamiji opened the following conversation as the carriage reached the beaten street. One does not find any real endeavor in your country to get the woman educated. You, the men, are educating yourselves to develop your manhood, but what are you doing to educate and advance those who share all your happiness and misery, who lay down their lives to serve you in your homes? Disciple: Why, sir, just see how many schools and colleges have sprung up nowadays for our women, and how many of them are getting degrees of BA and MA. Swamiji: But all that is in the Western style. How many schools have been started on your own national lines in the spirit of your own religious ordinances? But alas, such a system does not obtain even among the males of your country, what to speak of females. It is seen from the official statistics that only 3 or 4% of the people in India are educated, and not even 1% of the females. Otherwise, how could the country come to such a fallen condition? How can there be any progress of the country without the spread of education, the dawning of knowledge? Even no real effort or exertion in the cause is visible among the few in your country, who are the promise of the future. You had you who have received the blessing of education, but know for certain that absolutely nothing can be done to improve the state of things unless there is spread of education first among the women and masses. And so I have it in my mind to train up some brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, the former of whom will eventually take the vow of sannyasa and try to carry the light of education among the masses from village to village throughout the country, while the latter will do the same among women. But the whole work must be done in the style of our own country. Just as centers have to be started for men, so also centers have to be started for teaching women. Brahmacharinis of education and character should take up the task of teaching at these different centers. History and the Puranas, housekeeping and the arts, the duties of home life and principles that make for the development of an ideal character have to be taught with the help of modern sciences, and the female student must be trained up in ethical spiritual life. We must see to their growing up as ideal matrons of home in time. The children of such mothers will make further progress in the virtues that distinguish themselves. It is only in the homes of educated and pious mother that great men are born, and you have reduced your women to something like manufacturing machines. Alas, for heaven's sake, is this the outcome of your education? The uplift of the women, the awakening of masses must come first, and then only can any real good comes about for the country, for India. Near Chorbagan, Swamiji gave it out to the disciples that the founders of the Mahakali Pathsala, the Tapaswini Mataji, ascetic mother, had invited him to visit her institution. When our carriage stopped at its destination, 3 or 4 gentlemen greeted Swamiji and showed him up to the first floor. There the Tapaswini mother received him standing. Presently she escorted him into one of the classes where all the maidens stood up in greeting. At a word from Mataji, all of them commenced reciting the Sanskrit meditation of Lord Shiva with proper intonation. Then they demonstrated at the instance of the mother how they were taught the ceremonies of worship in their school. After watching all this with much delight and interest, Swamiji proceeded to visit the other classes. After this, Mataji sent for some particular girl and asked her to explain before Swamiji the first verse of the third canto of Kalidasa's Raghuvansa, which he did in Sanskrit. Swamiji expressed his great appreciation of the measure of success Mataji had attained by her perseverance and application in the cause of diffusing education among women. In reply, she said with much humility, "In my service to my students, I look upon them as the Divine Mother. Well, in starting the school, I have neither fame nor any other object in view." Being asked by Mataji, Swamiji recorded his opinion about the institution in the visitor's book, the last line of which was, "The movement is in the right direction." After saluting Mataji, Swamiji went back to his carriage, which then proceeded towards Bagh Bazar, while the following conversation took place between Swamiji and the disciple. Swamiji: "How far is the birthplace of this venerable lady? She has renounced everything of her worldly life, and yet how diligent in the service of humanity. Had she not been a woman, could she ever have undertaken the teaching of women in the way she is doing? What I saw here was all good, but that some male householders should be pitchforked as teachers is a thing I cannot approve of. The duty of teaching in the school ought to dwell in every respect and educated widows and brahmacharis. It is good to avoid in this country any association of men with women's school. Disciple: "But sir, how would you get now in this country learned and virtuous women like Gargi, Khana or Leelavati?" Swamiji: "Do you think women of that type don't exist now in the country? Still, on this sacred soil of India, this land of Sita and Savitri, among women may be found such character, such spirit of service, such affection, compassion, contentment, and reverence as I could not find anywhere else in the world. In the West, the women did not very often seem to me to be women at all. They appear to be quite the replicas of men. Driving vehicles, drudging in offices, attending schools, doing professional duties. In India alone, the sight of famine, modesty, and reserve soothes the eye. With such materials of great promise, you could not, alas, work out their uplift. You did not try to infuse the light of knowledge into them. For if they get the right sort of education, they may well turn out to be the ideal woman in the world." Disciple: "Do you think, sir, the same consummation would be reached through the way Mataji is educating her students? These students would soon grow up and get married and would presently shade into the likeness of all other women of the common run. So I think if these girls might be made to adopt brahmacharya, then only could they devote their lives to the cause of the country, progress, and attend to the high ideals preached in our sacred books." Swamiji: "Yes, everything will come About in time such educated men are not yet born in this country, who can keep their girls unmarried without fear of social punishment. Just to see how before the girls exceed the age of 12 or 13 people hasten to give them away in marriage out of this fear of their social equality. Only the other day, when the age of consent bill was being passed, the leaders of the society massed together millions of men to send up the cry. We don't want the bill. Had this been in any other country, far from getting up meeting to send forth a cry like that, people would have hidden their heads under their roofs in the insane that such a calumny could yet stain their society, disciple. But sir, I don't think the ancient lawgivers could support this custom of early marriage without any rhyme or reason. There must be some secret meaning in this attitude of theirs, Swamiji. Well, what may be this secret meaning? Please. Disciple, take it for instance in the first place that if the girls are married at an early age, they may come over to their husband's home to learn the peculiar ways and usages of the family from the early years of their life. They may acquire adequate skill in the duties of the household under the guidance of their parents-in-law. In the homes of their own parents, on the other hand, there is the likelihood of grown-up daughters going astray. But married early, they have no chance of thus going wrong, and over and above this, such feminine virtues as modesty, reserve, fortitude, and diligence are apt to develop in them. Swamiji, in favor of the other side of the question again, it may be argued that early marriage leads to premature childbearing, which accounts for most of our women dying early. Their progeny also being of low vitality go to swell the ranks of our country's beggars. For if the physique of the parents be not strong and healthy, how can strong and healthy children be born at all? Married a little later and bred in culture, our mothers will give birth to children who would be able to achieve real good of the country. The reason why you have so many widows in your every home lies here in this custom of early marriage. If the number of early marriages declines, that of widows is bound to follow suit. Disciple. But sir, it seems to me if our women are married late in life, they are apt to be less mindful of their household duty. I have heard that the mother-in-law in Calcutta very often do all the cooking while the educated daughter-in-laws sit idle with red paint around their feet. But in our East Bengal, such a thing is never allowed to take place, Swamiji. But everywhere under the sun you find the same blending of the good and the bad. In my opinion, society in every country saves itself out of its own initiative. So we need not trouble our heads prematurely about such reforms as the abolition of early marriage, the remarriage of widows, and so on. Our part of the duty lies in imparting true education to all men and women in society. As an outcome of that education, they will of themselves be able to know what is good for them and what is bad, and will spontaneously eschew the latter. It will not be then necessary to pull down or set up anything in society by coercion. Disciple, what sort of education do you think is suited to our women? Swamiji, religion, art, science, housekeeping, cooking, sewing, hygiene. The simple essential points in these subjects ought to be taught to our women. It is not good to let them touch novels and fiction. The Maha Mahakali Patsala is to a great extent moving in the right direction, but only teaching rites of worship won't do. Their education must be an eye-opener in all matters. Ideal characters must always be presented before the view of the girls to imbue them with a devotion to lofty principles of selflessness. The noble examples of Sita, Savitri, Damayanti, Lilavati, Khana and Mira should be brought home to their minds, and they should be inspired to mold their own lives in the light of these. Our cab now reached the house of the late Babu Balram Bose at Bagh Bazar. Swamiji alighted from it and went upstairs. There he recounted the whole of his experience at the Mahakali Patsala to those who had assembled there to see him. Then, while discussing what the members of the newly formed Ramakrishna mission should do, Swamiji proceeded to establish by various arguments the supreme importance of the gift of learning and the gift of knowledge. Turning to the disciple, he said, "Educate, educate. Nane pantha vidyate nae. Then this there be no other way." And referring in banter to the party who do not favor educational propaganda, he said, "Well, don't go into the party of Prahladas." Asked as to the meaning of the expression, he replied, "Oh, have not you heard? Tears rushed out of the eyes of Prahlada at the very sight of the first letter Ka of the alphabet, as it reminded him of Krishna. So how could any studies be proceeded with? But then the tears in Prahlada's eyes were tears of love, while your fools affect tears in fright. Many of the devotees are also like that. All of those present burst out laughing on hearing this, and Swami Yogananda said to Swamiji, "Well, once you have the urge within towards anything to be done, you won't have any peace until you see the utmost done about it. Now, what you have a mind to have done shall be done, no doubt." The allusion here is to the classification of various gifts mentioned by Manu. Talk 9. Topics discussed: Rigveda, Max Muller, the theory of creation, Swami Vivekananda's great heart, need for the study of scriptures, service of living beings. Place Calcutta, year 1897. For the last 10 days, the disciple had been studying Saina's commentary on the Rig Veda with Swamiji, who was staying then at the house of the late Babu Balram Bose at Bagh Bazar. Max Muller's volumes on Rig Veda had been brought from a wealthy friend's private library. Swamiji was correcting the disciple every now and then and giving him the true pronunciation or construction as necessary. Sometimes, while explaining the arguments of Saina to establish the eternity of the Vedas, Swamiji was praising very highly the commentator's wonderful ingenuity. Sometimes again, while arguing out the deeper signification of the doctrine, he was putting forward a difference in view and indulging in an innocent squib at Saina. While our study had proceeded thus for a while, Swamiji raised the topic about Max Muller and continued thus. "Well, do you know, my impression is that it is Saina who is born again as Max Muller to revive his own commentary on the Vedas. I have had this notion for long. It became confirmed in my mind, it seems, after I had seen Muller. Even here in this country, you don't find a scholar so persevering and so firmly grounded in the Vedas and the Vedanta. Over and above this, what a deep, unfathomable respect for Sri Ramakrishna. Do you know he believes in his divine incarnation? And what great hostility towards me when I was his guest. Seeing the old man and his lady, it seemed to me that they were living their home life like another Vasistha and Arundhati. At the time of parting with me, tears came into the eyes of the old man, disciple. But sir, if Saina himself became Max Muller, then why was he born as a Malecha instead of being born in the sacred land of India? Swamiji, The feeling and the distinction that I am an Aryan and the other is a Malecha come from ignorance. But one who is the commentator of the Veda, the shining embodiment of knowledge, what are Varnasrama and caste division to him. To him they are wholly meaningless, and he can assume human birth wherever he likes for doing good to mankind, especially if he did not choose to be born in a land which excelled both in learning and wealth. Where would he where would he secure the large expenses for publishing such stupendous volumes? Did not you hear that the East India Company paid 9 lakhs of rupees in cash to have the Rig Veda published? Even this money was not enough. Hundreds of Vedic Pandits had to be employed in this country on monthly stipends. Has anybody seen in this age here in this country such profound yearning for knowledge, such prodigious investment of money for the sake of light and learning? Max Muller himself has written it in his preface that for 25 years he prepared only the manuscripts. Then the printing took another 20 years. It is not possible for an ordinary man to drudge for 45 years of his life with one publication. Just think of it. Is it an idle fancy of mine to say he is Shaina himself? After this talk about Max Muller, the reading of the Vedas was resumed. Now Swamiji began variously to support the view of Saina that creation proceeded out of the Vedas. He said, Veda means the sum total of eternal truths. The Vedic rishis experienced those truths. They can be experienced only by seers of the supersensuous and not by common men like us. That's why in the Vedas the term Rishi means the seer of the truth of the mantras and not any Brahmana with the holy thread hanging down the neck. The division of society into caste came about later on. Veda is of the nature of Shabda or the idea. It is but the sum total of ideas. Shabda, according to the old Vedic meaning of the term, is the subtle idea which reveals itself by taking the gross form later on. So, owing to the dissolution of the creation, the subtle seeds of the future creation become involved in the Veda. Accordingly, in the Puranas, you find that during the first divine incarnation, the Veda is first made manifest. In this incarnation, the Veda being first revealed, the other creative manifestations began to follow. Or in other words, all the created objects began to come into concrete being out of the Shabdas or ideas in the Veda. For in Shabda or idea, all gross objects have their subtle forms. Creation had proceeded in the same way in all previous cycles or kalpas. This you mind in the Sandhya mantra of the Vedas. Surya Chandramasho Dhata Yatha Puram Kalpayata Prithviyo Divam Charantro Aksmatho Svaha. The sun, the moon, the earth, the atmosphere, the heaven, the upper spheres, all the creator projected in the same manner and process as in the previous cycle. Do you understand? Disciple, but sir, how is the absence of an actual concrete object can the Shabda or idea be applied and for what? And how are the names to be given at all? Swamiji. Yes, that is what on the first thought seems to be the difficulty. But just think of this. Supposing this jug breaks into pieces, does the idea of a jug become null and void? No, because the jug is the gross effect, while the idea jug is the subtle state or the Shabda state of the jug. In the same way, the Shabda state of every object is in its subtle state, and the things we see, hear, touch, or perceive in any manner are the gross manifestations of entities in the subtle or Shabda state, just as we may speak of the effect and its cause. Even when the whole creation is annihilated, the Shabda, as the consciousness of the universe or the subtle reality of all concrete things, exists in Brahma as the cause. At the point of creative manifestation, this sum total or causal entities vibrate into activity as it were and as being the sonant material substance of it all, the eternal primal sound of Om continues to come out of itself. And then from the causal totality comes out first the subtle image or Shabda form of each particular thing and then its gross manifestation. Now that causal Shabda or world consciousness is Brahmana and it is the Veda. This is the purport of Shayana. Do you now understand? Disciple, no sir, I can't clearly comprehend it. Swamiji, well, you understand. I suppose that even if all the jugs in the universe were to be destroyed, the idea or Shabda jug would still exist. So, if the universe be destroyed, I mean, if all the things going to make up the universe be smashed to atoms, why should not the ideas or shabdas representing all of them in consciousness be still existing? And why cannot a second creation be supposed to come out of them in time? Disciple, but sir, if one cries out jug, jug, that does not cause any jug to be produced. Swamiji, no. Nothing is produced if you or I cry out like that. But a jug must be revealed if the idea of it rises in the Brahma which is present in its creative determinations. When we see even those established in the practice of religion, sadhakas, bringing about by willpower things otherwise impossible to happen, what to speak of Brahma with perfect creativeness of will? At the point of creation, Brahma becomes manifest as a Shabda idea and then assume the form of a Nada or Om. At the next stage, the particular Shabdas or ideas that variously existed in former cycles such as Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, cow, man, etc. begin to come out of that Om. As soon as these ideas appear in Brahma endowed with perfect will, the corresponding concrete things also appear and gradually the diversified universe becomes manifest. Do you know? Now understand how Shabda is the source of creation. Disciple, yes, I just form some idea of it, but there is no clear comprehension in the mind. Swamiji, well, clear comprehension, inward realization is no small matter, my son. When the mind proceeds towards self-absorption in Brahma, it passes through all these stages one by one to reach the absolute nirvikalpa state at last. In the process of entering into samadhi, first the universe appears as one mass of ideas, then the whole thing loses itself in a profound Om, then even that melts away, even that seems to be between being and non-being, that is the experience of the eternal Nada. And then the mind becomes lost in the reality of Dharma and then it is done. All is peace. The disciple sat mute thinking that none could express and explain it in the way Swamiji was doing, unless the whole thing were matter of one's own experience. Swamiji then resumed the subject. Great men like avatars in coming back from samadhi to the realm of eye and mind first experience the unmanifest nada which by degree grows distinct and appears as Om, and then from Omkara, the subtle form of the universe as a mass of ideas becomes experienced, and last the material universe comes into perception. But ordinary sadhakas somehow reach beyond nada through immense practice, and when once they attain to the direct realization of Brahma, they cannot again come back to the lower plane of material perception. They melt away in Brahma, Aksoranokshite, Aksorenikhape, like water in a milk. When all this talk on the theory of creation was going on, the great dramatist Babu Grish Chandra Ghosh appeared on the scene. Swamiji gave him his courteous greetings and continued his lesson to the disciple. Shabda are again divided into two classes, the Vedic Shabdas and those in common human use. I found this position in the Nyaya book called Shabda Shakti Prakashika. There the arguments no doubt indicate great power of thought, but oh, the terminology confounds the brain. Now turning to Greece, Babu Swamiji said, "What do you say, GC? Well, you do not care to study all this, you pass your days with your adoration of this and that God. Ah, Greece Babu, what shall I study, brother? I have neither time nor understanding enough to pay into all that. But this time, with Sri Ramakrishna's grace, I shall pass by with greetings to your Vedas and Vedanta and take one leap too far beyond. He gets you through all these studies because he wants to get many a thing done by you. But we have no need of them. Saying this, Greece Babu again and again touched the big Rig Veda volumes with his head, uttering all victory to Ramakrishna in the form of the Veda. Swamiji was now in a sort of deep reverie when Greece Babu suddenly called out to him and said, "Well, hear me please. A good deal of study you have made in the Vedas and Vedanta, but say, did you find anywhere in them any way for us out of all these profound miseries in the country? All these wailings of grief, all this starvation, all these crimes of adultery, and the many horrible sins?" Saying this, he painted over and over again the horrid pictures of society. Swamiji remained perfectly quiet and speechless, while at the thought of the sorrows and miseries of his fellow men, tears began to flow out of his eyes, and seemingly to hide his feelings from us, he rose and left the room. Meanwhile, addressing the disciple, Greece Babu said, "Did you see Bengal? What a great loving heart. I don't honor your Swamiji simply for being a Pandit versed in the Vedas, but I honor him for that great heart of his which just made him retire weeping at the sorrows of his fellow beings." The disciple and Greece Babu then went on conversing with each other, the latter proving that knowledge and love were ultimately the same. In the meantime, Swamiji returned and asked the disciple, "Well, what was all this talk going on between you?" The disciple said, "Sir, we were talking about the Vedas and the wonder of it, that our Greece Babu has not studied these books but has grasped the ultimate truth with clear precision." Swamiji, all truths reveal themselves to him who has got real devotion to the Guru. He has hardly any need of studies, but such devotion and faith are very rare in this world. He who possesses those in the measure of our friend here need not study the Shastras, but the whole rushes forward to imitate him will only bring about his own ruin. Always follow his advice, but never attempt to imitate his ways. Disciple, yes, sir, Swamiji. No saying ditto merely. Do grasp clearly the words I say. Don't nod assent like a fool to everything said. Don't put implicit faith even if I declare something. First clearly grasp and then accept. Sri Ramakrishna always used to insist on my accepting every word of his only after clear comprehension of it. Walk on your path only with what sound principle, clear reasoning, and scripture all declare as true. Thus, by constant reflection, the intellect will become clear and then only can Brahma be reflected therein. Do you understand? Disciple, yes sir, I do. But the brain gets puzzled with the different views of different men. This very moment I was being told by Greece Babu, what will you do with all this studying? And then you come and say, reflect on what you hear and read about. So, what exactly am I to do? Swamiji, both what he and I have advised you are true. The only difference is that the advice of both has been given from different standpoints. There is a stage of spiritual life where all reasonings are hushed, muka swadanavati, like some delicious taste enjoyed by the dumb. And there is another mode of spiritual life in which one has to realize the truth through the pursuit of scriptural learning, through studying and teaching. You have to proceed through studies and reflection. That is your way to realization, do you see? Receiving such a mandate from Swamiji, the disciple in his folly took it to imply Greece Babu's discomfiture, and so turning towards him said, do you hear, sir? Swamiji's advice to me plainly is just to study and reflect on the Vedas and Vedanta. Greece Babu, well, you go on doing so with Swamiji's blessings, you will indeed succeed in that way. Swami Sadananda arrived there at that moment, and seeing him, Swamiji at once said, do you know my heart is sorely troubled by the picture of our country's miseries GC was depicting just now. Well, can you do anything for our country? Sadananda. Maharaj, let the mandate once go forth, your slave is ready. Swamiji, first on a pretty small scale start a relief center where the poor and the distressed may obtain relief and the diseased may be nursed. Helpless people having none to look after them will be relieved and served there, irrespective of creed or color. Do you see? Sadananda, just as you command, sir. Swamiji, there is no greater dharma than the service of living beings. If this dharma can be practiced in the real spirit, then mukti Karphalayate, liberation comes as a fruit on the very palm of one's hand. Addressing Greece Babu, now Swamiji said, do you know, Greece Babu, it occurs to me that even if 1,000 births have to be taken in order to relieve the sorrows of the even a single soul may have a little bit of his grief relieved. Why I will do it? Well, what avails at all to have only one's own liberation? All men should be taken along with oneself or that way. Can you say why a feeling like this comes up foremost in my mind? Greece Babu. Ah, otherwise, why should Sri Ramakrishna declare you to be greater than all other in spiritual competence? Saying this, Greece Babu took leave of us all to go elsewhere on some business. Talk number 10. Topics: the ideal of sannyasa, Buddha and the institution of sannyasa, meeting the criticism against sannyasa, who is a real sannyasi. The place Alam Bazar Mutt, year 1897. After Swamiji's first return to Calcutta from the west, he always used to place before the zealous young man who visited him the lofty ideals of renunciation, and anyone expressing his desire of accepting sannyasa would receive from him great encouragement and kindness. So, inspired by his enthusiasm, some young men of great good fortune gave up their worldly life in those days and became initiated by him into sannyasa. The disciple was present at the Alam Bazar Math the day the first four of this batch were given sannyasa by Swamiji. Often has the disciple heard it from the sannyasin of the Math that Swamiji was repeatedly requested by his brother monks not to admit one particular candidate into sannyasa, whereupon Swamiji replied, "Ah, if even we shrink from working out the salvation of the sinful, the heavy laden, the humiliated, and the afflicted in soul, who else are to take care of them in this world? No, don't you please stand against me in this matter." So Swamiji's strong opinion triumphed, and always the refuge of the helpless he resolved out of his great love to give sannyasa. The disciple had been staying at the mutt for the last 2 days when Swamiji called him and said, "Well, you belong to the priestly class. Tomorrow you get them to perform their Shraddha, and the next day I shall give them sannyasa. So get yourself ready by consulting the books of ceremonials today." The disciple vowed to this mandate of Swamiji, and the ceremony was duly gone through. But the disciple became very much depressed at the thought of the great sternness of sannyasa. Swamiji, detecting his mental agitation, asked him, "Well, I see you feel some dread in your mind at all this experience, is it not so?" And when the disciple confessed it to be so, Swamiji said, "From this day, these four are dead to the world, and new bodies, new thoughts, new garments will be theirs from tomorrow, and shining in the glory of Brahma, they will live like a flaming fire. Ne karmana ne parjaya dhanen tyagene ke amritva manasya." Not by work, not by progeny, nor by wealth, but by renunciation alone some attained immortality. After the ceremony, the four brahmacharis bowed at the feet of Swamiji. He blessed them and said, "You have the enthusiasm to embrace the loftiest woe of human life. Blessed indeed is your birth, blessed your family, blessed the mothers who held you in their womb. Kulam Pritram Janani Kritartha, the whole family line becomes hallowed. The mother achieves her highest." That day after supper, Swamiji talked of the ideal of sannyasa alone to the zealous candidates for sannyasa. He said the real aim of sannyasa is Atmano Moksartham Jagati Jataya, for the highest freedom of the self and the good of the world. Without having sannyasa, none can really be a knower of Dharma. This is what the Vedas and the Vedanta proclaim. Don't listen to the words of those who say we shall both live the worldly life and be knowers of Dharma. That is the flattering self-consolation of crypto pleasure seekers. He who has the slightest desire for worldly pleasures, even a shred of some such craving, will feel frightened at the thought of the path you are going to tread. So, to give himself some consolation, he goes about preaching that impossible creed of harmonizing bhoga and tyaga. That is all raving of lunatics. The four things of the demented idol theories, contrary to the scriptures, contrary to the Vedas. No freedom without renunciation. Highest love for God can never be achieved without renunciation. Renunciation is the word Nane Pantha Vidyate Anai. There is no other way than this. Even the Gita says, Kamyanam karmenam nyas sannyas kavayo viduhu. The sages know sannyasa to be the giving up all work that has desire for its end. Nobody attains freedom without shaking off the coils of worldly worries. The very fact that somebody lives the worldly life proves that he is tied down to as the bound slave of some cravings or other. Why otherwise will he cling to that life at all? He is the slave either of lust or of gold or position or fame or of learning or of scholarship. It is only after freeing oneself from all this thraldom that one can get along the way of freedom. Let people argue as loud as they please. I have got this conviction that unless all these bonds are given up, unless the monastic life is embraced, none is going to be saved. No attainment of Brahmajnana is possible. Disciple, do you mean, sir, that merely taking up sannyasa will lead one to the goal, Swamiji? Whether the goal is attained or not is not the point before us now. But until you get out of this wheel of samsara, until the slavery of desire is shaken off, you can't attain either bhakti or mukti. To the knower of Brahma, supernatural powers or prosperity are mere trivialities. Disciple, sir, is there any special time for sannyasa and are there different kind of it? Swamiji, there is no special time prescribed for a life of sannyasa. The Shruti says, Yad Hare Virjet, Tad Hare Parvarjet. Directly the spirit of renunciation comes, you should take up sannyasa. The Yoga Vasishtha also says, युवैव धर्मशील सयात अनित्यम खनु जीवितम को ही जानाति काश्याद नर्तु कालो भविष्यति. Owing to life itself being frail and uncertain, one should be devoted to religion even in one's youth, for who knows when one's body may fall off. The Shastras are found to speak of four kinds of sannyasa. Number one, Vidvat. Number two, Vividisha. Number three, Markata. Number four, Atura. The awakening of real renunciation all at once and the consequent giving up of the world through sannyasa is something that never happens unless there are strong sanskaras or tendencies developed from previous birth, and this is called the Vidvat sannyasa. Vividisha sannyasa is the case of one who, out of a strong yearning for the knowledge of the self through the pursuit of scriptural study and practice, goes to the man of realization and from him embraces sannyasa to give himself up to those pursuits. Markata sannyasa is the case of a man who is driven out of world by some of its chastisements such as the death of a relative or the like, and then takes up sannyasa, though in such a case the renouncing spirit does not endure long. Sri Ramakrishna used to say of it, with this kind of renunciation one hastens away to the up country and then happens to get hold of a nice job and then eventually perhaps arranges to get his wife brought over to him, or perhaps he takes to a new one. And last, there is another kind of sannyasa which the Shastras prescribe for a man who is lying on his deathbed, the hope of a whose life has been given up. For then, if he dies with the holiest of woes upon him, and in his next birth the merit of it will accrue to him. And in case he recovers, he shall not go back to his old life again, but live the rest of his days in the noble endeavor after Brahmajnana. Swami Shivananda gave this kind of sannyasa to your uncle. The poor man died, but through that initiation he will come to a new birth of higher excellence. After all, there is no other way to the knowledge of the self but through sannyasa. Disciple, what then, sir, will be the fate of the householders? Swami ji, Why? Through the merit of good karma, they shall have this renunciation in some future birth of theirs. And directly this renunciation comes, there is an end of all troubles. With no further delay, he gets across this mystery of life and death. But then all rules have their exceptions. A few, one or two, may be seen to attain the highest freedom by the true fulfillment of the householder's dharma, as we have among us Nag Mahasaya, for instance, disciples, or even the Upanishads, etc., do not clearly teach about renunciation and sannyasa. Swamiji, what do you talk like a madman? Renunciation is the very soul of the Upanishads. Illumination born of discriminative reflection is the ultimate aim of Upanishadic knowledge. My belief, however, is that it was since the time of Buddha that the monastic was preached more thoroughly all over India, and renunciation, the giving up of sense enjoyment, was recognized as the highest aim of religious life. And Hinduism has absorbed into itself this Buddhistic spirit of renunciation. Never was a great man of such renunciation born in this world as Buddha. Disciple, do you then mean, sir, that before Buddha's advent there was very little of the spirit of renunciation in the country, and there were hardly any sannyasis at all? Swamiji, who says that? The non-monastic institution was there, but the generality of people did not recognize it, and the goal of life. There was no such staunch spirit for it. There was no such firmness in spiritual discrimination. So even when Buddha betook himself to so many yogis and sadhus, nowhere did he acquire the peace he wanted. And then to realize the highest, he fell back on his own exertions and seated on a spot with the famous words, Ihasanimansasarire, let my body wither away on this seat, etc., rose from it only after becoming the Buddha, the illumined one. All the many mats that you now see in India occupied by monks were once in the possession of Buddhism. The Hindus have only made them their own by modifying them in their own fashion. Really speaking, the institution of sannyasa originated with Buddha. It was he who breathed life into the dead bones of this institution. Swami Rama Krishnananda, a brother disciple of Swamiji, interposed, but the ancient law books and Puranas are good authority that all the four ashramas had existed in India before Buddha was born. Swamiji replied, most of the Puranas, the codes of Manu and others, as well as much of the Mahabharata, form but recent literature. Bhagavan Buddha was much earlier than all that. On that supposition, rejoined Swami Ramakrishnananda, discussions about Buddhism would be found in the Vedas, Upanishads, the law books, Puranas, and the like. But since such discussions are not found in these ancient books, how can you say that Buddha antedated them all? In a few old Puranas, of course, accounts of Buddhistic doctrine are partially given, but from these it can't be concluded that the scriptures of the Hindus, such as the law books and Puranas, are of a recent date. Swamiji, please read history and you will find that Hinduism has become so great only by absorbing all the ideas of Buddha. Swami Rama Krishnananda, it seems to me that Buddha has only left revivified the great Hindu ideas by thoroughly practicing in his life such principles as renunciation, non-attachment, and so on, Swamiji. But this position can't be proved, for we don't get any history before Buddha was born. If we accept history only as authority, we have to admit that in the midst of the profound darkness of the ancient times, Buddha only shines forth as a figure radiated with the light of knowledge. Now the topic of sannyasa was resumed and Swamiji said, wheresoever might lie the origin of sannyasa, the goal of human life is to become a knower of Dharma by embracing this vow of renunciation. The supreme end is to enter the life of sannyasa. They alone are blessed indeed who have broken off from worldly life through a spirit of renunciation. Evidently, during the argumentation, Swamiji was taking his stand on the conclusions of modern historical studies, thereby giving his encouragement and support to such new efforts and methods. But we know from the one of his letters to Swami Swarupananda that Swamiji broke off later on from the position of these modern scholars and worked out pre-Buddhistic origin of such a modern Hinduism, which these scholars are still. So I end this video here. Please, thanks a lot for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar.